we're now at a spot where we have our logo in, and your logo could be anything from that John Deere logo we looked at to a sports team that you like the Twins. We just got to be careful that we don't get really, really detailed with how tight those lines are together, because you'll see here in a minute the router bits will not fit into it. So now we need to get numbers on this clock, and I'm not. It doesn't matter to me what you do for numbers. We're going to do 4 numbers just for the sake of this video, so it doesn't get crazy long. You could do all 12 of them, like some of the examples I've shown you. You could do numbers. You could do Roman numerals. All of them are going to work out just fine. What we want to make sure is that we don't have any lines right now that are selected pink. So if you've got any lines selected pink, just click someplace there's not a line and get them unselected. We're going to come over here to the text tool that does not have a vector box around it, because we don't want a box around our text. And I'm just going to type in here 12. And what we want to look at is the size. Right away I think that looks a little small, so I'm going to change this to 3, and you'll see that get bigger. The other thing we want to look at is what the text actually looks like. So we can see with this style, Britannic bold, we get it really narrow right here. And we're using a 1/4 inch router bit that I don't think is going to fit in there. And some of these are a lot worse than others, or a lot thinner than others. We can start getting some texts like this that there is no way that router bit is going to fit in there. So we want to try to find kind of a bold block letter. Like that one is really simple, Arial Black, one of the more common fonts. But we even have to be careful of things like this, because it pinches down real tight here and here, and that router bit's not going to fit in there to make the color, to make that cut. So Arial Black was good. There's another one up here that I liked. I usually like the bold ones. Let's see what Berlin Sands. I like that one right there. So the 3 inches is going to be important, because we want to keep all of ours at the same size. So you can change them all, and you can go in and manually change them, but you want to make sure that your letters are all the same size. Otherwise it looks kind of goofy when we set this all up. So we can see the 12 is pink. If I click someplace else, you see that 12 disappears there, and I can write in another letter, and it automatically defaults to the same size and the same font. So then I select someplace else, and I'm going to get my 6. And then I'm going to select someplace else, and I'm going to get my 9. So now I've got all my numbers here. Again, you can do however many numbers you want, but I'm going to say close. And now I need to place these numbers. And I think the largest mistake people make is they get too close to the edge with it. Now, of course, it's got to be closer to the edge, but we want to leave a little bit of room on the edge of our board. 1 for our router bit, and 2 if we do any sort of a profiled edge, like a round over it. So when you click on the letter, look for the dots, and that center dot is going to be important. So I want that center dot to be right on this line here. When I click the 9, I want to make sure that the center dot of the line 9 is on the line, and some of this is eyeballing it, so I will admit that it is possible to get this wrong. And I'm trying to stay away from the edge a little bit, but still have it look like a clock. I think that 3 is a little far away. I'm going to bring it just a little bit closer. Some of you people with really good eyes are going to be able to decipher that really well. So I'm going with these 3 numbers again. Kind of a simple looking clock, but we get to start toolpathing now. So to toolpath it, I can do this a lot of different ways, but I'm going to start with the numbers. If I click on my toolpath, you're going to see that there are several different toolpaths, anywhere from drilling, like if we were making a game board or a cribbage board. This is called a pocket toolpath. So what that does is it recognizes 2 lines and it removes the material between them. So it would carve out the 1 and the 2, the 3, the 6, the 9, and the TC. If I do the profile toolpath, if I do the profile toolpath, that is going to cut on the line. So if I used like a V bit, then it would trace over these lines. And you can do either route. Either one looks just fine. For this, I'm going to do a pocket toolpath, and I'm going to hold down Shift and select each of these numbers. So by holding down Shift, I can select more than one thing. Got all the TC, and all the parts, because I want them to all be the same depth. So I'm going to come back here to Toolpaths, and I want my cut depth to be 0.125. We're going to cut in 1/8 of an inch. My tool path, I'm just going to remove the one that's there, and I'm going to hit select. And I want to find the end mill that is 0.25, and when you click on it, you get a little preview of what that looks like. So the diameter of the cutter head is 1/4 of an inch. You can see that here, diameter 1/4 of an inch. Don't worry about the flutes. Pass depth is 0.25. That means it's not going to go any deeper than 1/4 inch into the board as we're cutting it. The step over is how much overlap is there between the passes. So 80% is really good for a bit that looks like this. But if I was going to try to do it with a bit that was a ball nose bit, that step over's got to be a lot less because there's only a really little amount that is actually cutting. So because we're doing the end mill, it's nice and flat. We're going to get square cuts. 80% is great. Feed rate 150 inches is good. Plunge rate of 30. So I'm just going to hit select. This stuff is all fine. Offset, climbing. We want to ramp the plunge moves 1 inch, which means the router bit is not going to go straight down into the wood. It's going to slowly go into the wood, which is what we want. And we're going to do a pocket cut. So if you ever lose that, just click back on tool path. And we could call it, what I'm going to call it, numbers logo. And then calculate. So these blue lines is the path that the tool is going to take to make the cut. So it looks a little bit choppy, but it's the cutter head is 1/4 of an inch, and these are obviously bigger than 1/4 of an inch, so it has to make more than one pass. So the red lines are where the tool travels when it's not cutting. So we see it's going to start here, cut the T, and then it's going to go to the C, then to here, then to here, then to the top of the T, then to the 3, 12, 9. We can't really change that, nor is it that important to change it. So we're just going to be okay with this and say close. This automatically switches us to the 3D tab. Now let's go to the 2D tab. If I don't want to see the tool path, I just uncheck that, and it's a little bit clearer to see. I want to click outside of all tool paths to deselect everything, and I want to cut the outside circle. So this circle right here. You're probably going to have a block of wood that's square, and we want it to be a circle. Now, we are using the router, the smaller IQ router bit. The one, let's see if I can get a good picture of it up here. We're going to go back to the home. CNC post processors. We're using this one right here. It is not the great big one. This one we don't want to cut all the way through into the table. Like we've got that spoil board on this one we can cut into. We're not going to do that on here. We're going to actually what's called onion skin it, and we're going to leave a little bit of wood underneath of it. Then we'll just run through the time saver to get rid of that skin. So I selecting the line that I want to cut. I'm going to come back here to tool path, and I'm going to pick the profile tool path, which means that this cut is going to follow that line. I want my cut depth to be 0.0495 because I'm using a 1/2 inch piece of wood. If I was using a thicker piece of wood, I would want to cut 5/1000 less than it, so it leaves just a little bit of wood in there. That way we're not cutting the table, and we can very easily run this through the time saver upside down, and it will cut itself out. Notice how this diameter circle is right up next to the edge of the block. So I'm actually going to run my router bit on the inside of the line. Typically when we're cutting parts out for projects, we cut on the outside of the line, but in here it's not that big a deal if the clock's a little bit small. You could also do right on the line, but I still think I'm going to get little flat spots on the edges, so I'm going to cut on the inside. I don't want tabs, I don't want ramps. I am going to do the same thing, give that 1 inch ramp here, and then hit calculate. And that is going to, you can see 2 lines there. If I select both of these, we can see them both. And the reason we're seeing 2 paths, 2 passes, is because my router bit is set to only cut 1/4 inch deep at a time. So that way we're not overloading the router bit. Okay, we're almost done here. What I like to do is check this over to make sure that everything is looking good. So I'm going to ask you to do 2 things at this point. Number 1 is grab a flash drive and put it into the computer. Now your computers sometimes don't allow flash drives. So if that's the case, I will make a link on here, like a drop link. I'll make a link down here so you can submit your files here. So I need you to submit 2 files. The first one that I'd like you to submit is if you just go up here to File, Save As. You want to save this, and I like to do my initials, KLS, that's my initials. And I'm going to say on block 5, and I'm going to call it clock. Okay? So then I've already saved it, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hit cancel, but you would hit save, and I save that in my network drive. So find your network drive. I've got a folder called CNC Files or CNC Woods class. Save it in there. So that is this program file. So if there's little tweaks we have to do, we can do that. So that's the first thing, the first file you're going to save and drop. The second one that you're going to do is this one right here. So you're going to say close, and we actually want to write this. We want to write the code for this. And you've got to select that post processor. So that first video had those post processors, and we dropped that Laguna IQ HHC in there. And we want to say save toolpath, and it's going to ask us where. So go back to your same network drive, pop it into the CNC files, and hit save. That way we can open this up. And what I want you to do is we want to do a double check here. So I'm going to go open up that file. I'm going to go to CNC. I got so many files in here. I'm going to find CNC Woods class. And then numbers and logos when I say it. So I'm going to open it up. Now we have right here G-code. So this is super confusing to look at, but I want you to do one thing for me. I want you to come up here and say find Z negative, and then find next. So when we're looking for Z negatives, we are looking to see how far into our board this is going to go. And this is millimeters. And we just want to make sure that we're not going too deep into our board. So my board is a 1/2 inch thick. If you don't know how thick a 1/2 inch is in millimeters, so I'll go here, 1/2 2 mm. So that is 12.7 millimeters. So what I am looking for is if I get a Z negative of more than 12.7 millimeters, that means I'm cutting all the way through my board and into the table. So I'm going to keep hitting find next, and all I'm seeing is a Z negative 3. So that 3 millimeters is about that 1/8 of an inch that it's going to be cutting into my clock. So I'm just going to keep hitting find next, making sure that I don't have any Z negatives that are way too deep. And these lines that I'm going through right now are those ramps where it's incrementally going into it. So you'll see it eventually, it'll get to that negative 0.3 or negative 3, and then it keeps going, and then it has to ramp into it again. So you might have a lot of clicks here, but it's so worth it to not wreck anything. So you can even hit enter, and I'm just hitting enter quickly. Look at how many lines of code it takes just to cut that ramp to go into your project. So I'm just holding enter down. Getting through a few more ramps. Every time it starts a new cut, it's got to go through that. And I'm just scanning this to make sure that none of those Z negatives are too deep, because that would be a problem for our CNC router. If X and Y are off, we can live with that because the CNC router will stop that. But just holding down enter here, just finding the next one, making sure. You can see I'm just about through this. Okay. So I'm all the way through. So the very last Z negative is that negative 12.5. That's that circle that we're cutting out, but it's not into that Z negative 13. So I know it's not going all the way through my project. So when you're done with that, you can close the notepad. That's fine. We'll talk in the CNC class about what all those G-code things mean. But I'm back here. That should conclude this. Again, save this in your network drive, so if we need to edit something, we can come back and do that. Good luck, and then come get me, and I will double check your G-code with you to make sure we're not going to do anything silly, and we'll cut this out on the computer.